Hey guys, this is Dave with Audio In. Today we're going to be taking a look at the latest revision of the Dunu Kima, the Kima Classic. The original Kima wasn't released too long ago. I think it was released around the tail end of 2022, and I liked the original a lot. However, I did have a few issues with it, so we'll revisit my impressions and concerns with the original and then compare them and kind of see if some or all of those issues were addressed. But first, let's go ahead and talk about what's included in the box with the new Kima Classic. Of course, we have the IEMs and cable. It also comes with the same case as the one included with the original Kima and the same great tip assortment. So there's the black and blue tips, but also the candy and the S&S tips, which are both awesome. And you also get a cleaning cloth, a cleaning tool, and a 6.35 adapter. Now, as for price, specifications, and design, the Kima Classic comes in at $109 and it uses a single 10mm dynamic driver like the original. The housing itself is made from a zinc alloy and appears to retain the same exact shape and type of angular cut as the original. However, they did go with a different color scheme with both the IEM and cable, which I have to say I do like the aesthetics of the Classic better than the original. And like the original, the overall build and aesthetics are just so much better than what you typically see at this price point. It also fits my ears really well and it's very comfortable, especially with the included S&S tips. Okay, let's talk about the sound of the Kima Classic. So, like the original, the Kima Classic's sound signature is what I would consider to be V-shaped. However, they have made some pretty significant changes in its overall tuning. So, if you happen to watch my review of the original Kima, then you'll know I had a few issues, not only with its tuning, but with its overall performance. Firstly, it had some sub-bass roll-off. Secondly, the tuning between about 2.5K and 8K could sometimes cause some instruments and female vocals to sound a little unnatural and even cut off, so to speak. Then finally, I felt the detail retrieval, while acceptable for the $100 price range, still left me feeling a little underwhelmed. And there are lots of things I feel the Kima does do right, but it just felt like if it wasn't for those little issues, the Kima could have been the V-shape IEM to beat at the $100 price point. And of course, since then, we've had some V-shaped IEMs released recently at the $100 price point, like the C Audio Rinco, the 10 Hi-Fi T4 Plus, 7Hz legato. And to be honest, I do think those are all really fun IEMs, especially the legatos. But at the end of the day, I just didn't feel like any of those really wowed me for this price range. And now we have the Kima Classic. So the first thing I want to try and determine is whether or not the Kima Classic addresses any of the tuning issues I had with the original, and then we'll try and determine where it lands in terms of overall performance and value when compared to the competition. So we know we have a V-shaped IEM, and typically, we've talked about this before in other videos, the objective is less focused with a fun or V-shaped IEM on details and technicalities and naturalness, and geared more towards offering a fun and engaging type of listening experience, which is pretty much what you get with all the competition, the Rinco, Legato, T4. And in terms of tuning, certainly that's what you get with the Kima Classic. So elevated bass, recessed mids, and elevated upper mids and treble. But let's go ahead and break it down a little further, starting with the bass. So the first issue was sub-bass roll-off with the original. And if you compare the graphs, you'll see that not only the bass levels have been increased overall in the Classic, but in addition, you'll also see there is no sub-bass roll-off. So that's definitely no longer an issue. But again, now we also have the substantial increase in overall bass levels, which definitely brings that fun factor. But how does it affect the overall bass quality? Well, not much actually. So in addition to that healthy amount of added dynamics, slam and impact, you also get that nice visceral sensation that you hope to get in a dynamic driver. And as V-shaped IEMs go, this offers a fairly clean transition from the bass to the mids. So while you do have the added warmth in the mid bass and lower mids, it still maintains good detail to keep it from sounding muddy or bloated. So I definitely feel like the Classic is a step up in terms of overall bass quality over the original Kima, but not just over the original Kima. I also feel like now the Classic just might edge out some of the competition, again, in terms of overall bass quality and presentation. And then as you move into the mids, of course, they are quite recessed between 300 and 800 hertz, which is pretty typical in a V-shape IEM. And then as you move up towards the upper mids, it peaks out at around 2.8K. And there is about the same amount of vocal energy as the original Kima. However, the original Kima had a less overall balanced presentation than the Classic because it didn't quite have enough bass. It did. It wasn't completely out of balance, but I think it just could have used a little more bass to offset the forwardness of the upper mids. But now the Classic does that. It increases the bass quantities and kind of brings everything back into balance. The upper mids are still more forward than I prefer, but at least now there is more than enough bass to offset that extra upper mid presence. Now, moving into the treble, another issue I had with the original Kima was the tuning between about 2.5K and 8K. There was this downward slope, and you can see in the graph that could cause some vocals and instruments to come across as a little unnatural. And if you look at the Classic, you can see they've increased those frequencies, which does a few things. Firstly, instruments and vocals sound more natural, so it corrects that issue. Secondly, it gives you just a little more overall treble energy, so snare and tom attack and cymbal strikes have just a little more energy, which you want that in a V-shaped IEM. And again, it enhances those engaging characteristics. And thirdly, it brings out more details, which were kind of lacking in the original Kima. Again, that was one of the issues I had, which is a huge plus in my opinion. So that brings us to technicalities, which was actually something the original Kima performed quite well at. So like the original, the Classic also has a wider than average soundstage for an IEM. It also has very good instrument separation and imaging for this price point. It still doesn't have quite the forward depth I like to see, but its overall immersive qualities are still very, very good. It also has good upper treble extension, so it brings out that air and sparkle that I like. And then finally, detail retrieval. The detail retrieval of the Classic is very good and is a step up from the original in my opinion. So we have yet another improvement over the original, and it was already again very good and even rivaled the Alina SE in my opinion. So now with the Classic, we have even better detail retrieval. Okay, so I'm gonna wind this down. So to summarize my experience with the Kima Classic, firstly, I need to clarify something. I really do like certain types of V-shaped or fun IEMs. As a matter of fact, my V-shape reference right now is my IE600s, and those have been my go-to fun IEM for some time now. But that's not my preferred tuning. It's just something that I get a hankering for ever so often. My preferred tuning is neutral with just a little extra bass, and right now, at the $100 price point, the Galileo comes the closest to my preferred tuning. I would prefer a little more bass in the Galileo, but otherwise, again, in terms of overall tuning, the Galileo is kind of my reference at $100 right now. So my point is I still prefer the Galileo over all of my favorite V-shaped IEMs at this price. So I guess the question is, with the introduction of the Classic, which V-shaped tuned IEM at $100 that I own or have owned sits at the top? So we know the Classic corrects basically all of the issues I had with the original. So it's clearly an upgrade over the original in my opinion. But where does it land in terms of the competition? My opinion is it lands at the very top, because of all of the V-shaped or fun IEMs at this price point, again, that I own or have owned, the Kima strikes the best balance between fun and technical. So it has what I would consider to be a good V-shape, engaging and overall balanced tuning. Instruments sound fairly natural for this type of tuning. It has what I feel is some of the best detail retrieval at this price. And not to mention, The comfort, build quality, and design of both the IEMs and cable is excellent at this price. Now, of course, that also means that not only does the Kima Classic get my recommendation, it gets my top recommendation for a V-shaped IEM at $100. So that concludes my review of the Dunu Kima Classic. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. If you like my content, please take a second and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you would, please like this video, please share this video. I hope you have an awesome day.